Everyone knows Steve Jobs. But have you heard of Tony Fadell? He's the man who helped build the iPhone from scratch, hardware, vision, execution. Long before the first iPhone launch, Tony was already shaping the future of mobile tech. Yet history rarely mentions him. Today, we reveal the untold journey of the man Apple couldn't have succeeded without. Buckle up, this is not just about tech, it's about recognition, vision, and legacy. In the late 90s, Tony Fadell wasn't a household name. He was just another engineer with radical ideas no one wanted to hear. He pitched a pocket-sized music player and was rejected by almost every major tech firm. Desperate, he tried Apple, a company on the edge of collapse. But instead of a no, he got something rare: interest. And that interest sparked the birth of the iPod and eventually the iPhone. Most people think Steve Jobs invented the iPod. But behind the sleek wheel and intuitive design was Tony. He not only built the prototype, he led the entire project under pressure, chaos, and impossible timelines. It was his team, his hustle, and his foresight that made the iPod more than a gadget. It became a cultural reset, and it put Apple back on the map. Yet his name never made headlines. The iPod changed everything, but Tony wasn't done. While the world celebrated music in their pocket, he saw something bigger. A phone, a browser, a media center, all in one. Tony pushed for convergence, for simplicity, for the next evolution. Jobs listened, and the skunkworks began. It was Tony who envisioned the touch interface. It was Tony who figured out how to fit it all in your hand. History just forgot to mention him. January 2007, Steve Jobs steps on stage. One device, three functions, a revolution. But backstage, Tony Fadell watches silently. Every screw, every sensor, every shortcut, his fingerprints were everywhere. He fought for battery life, for speed, for elegance no one would see. While the world clapped for Steve, Tony stood in the shadows. Not bitter, just proud. Because changing the world never needed credit, just conviction. Tony wasn't just battling technology. He was battling Apple itself. As the iPhone team grew, so did the egos, the power plays, the politics. Tony clashed with executives who didn't share his product-first vision. He was intense, perfectionist, sometimes hard to work with. But that's the price of innovation. Inside Apple, some called him relentless. Outside, the world had no idea who he was. There comes a moment where passion turns into burnout. For Tony, that moment came after the iPhone launched. He had proven his vision, but inside, he felt done. Exhausted, unrecognized, trapped in a machine bigger than himself. So he made a choice. Walk away from Apple and everything he helped build. Sometimes leaving is the bravest innovation of all. After Apple, Tony didn't disappear. He reemerged with something unexpected, a thermostat. Nest wasn't just smart tech, it was empathy-driven design. He brought the same iPhone-level obsession to home products. And once again, he changed an industry. Google noticed and bought Nest for $3.2 billion. Tony had done it again, quietly, brilliantly. Tony Fadell never craved fame. He craved impact. His fingerprints are on devices you use daily. The iPod in your childhood. The iPhone in your hand. The smart home you live in. But you won't find his name in marketing campaigns. That's okay, because real innovators don't chase attention. They chase possibility. Tony Fadell isn't a billionaire icon. He's not a meme. He's not a Steve Jobs. But without him, there is no iPhone. No iPod, no smart home revolution. He's the architect behind the devices that shaped a generation. And maybe, just maybe, it's time we said his name out loud. Not just in tech circles, but in history books. Apple never denied Tony's work. They just never spotlighted it. Their strategy was clear: one face, one voice, one visionary. That face was Steve Jobs. It made the story cleaner, the myth stronger. Behind the scenes, Tony was fine with it. He believed in results, not applause. But imagine how different tech history might read if more stories had more names. Tony never wanted to be famous. But as tech media grew louder, silence felt like invisibility. He began speaking at conferences, doing interviews. Not to claim credit, but to teach. To mentor the next generation of builders. Of thinkers, of rebels. In a world full of tech influencers, Tony chose to be something rarer. A tech educator. After Nest, Tony launched a new mission. To help creators avoid the mistakes he made. He built investment funds, advised startups, and wrote a book. The Build, a no-fluff guide for makers. No hype, no billion-dollar dreams, just lessons from the trenches. His blueprint was clear. Solve real problems. Build what you believe in. And never wait for permission. It took decades, but recognition found Tony. Design awards, documentaries. Tim Cook himself called Tony a foundational force. But the truest validation came from engineers. Young product designers citing Tony's work as why they entered tech. Legacy isn't just about medals. It's about influence. And Tony Fadell had quietly become a legend. So, who really invented the iPhone? There's no one answer. But if you trace the guts, the grind, the relentless pursuit, Tony Fadell is everywhere inside that story. Call him the architect. Call him the engineer. Call him the unsung hero. Just don't forget to call him by name. Because behind every tech icon, there's always a builder. Tony Fadell's design philosophy wasn't just about beauty. It was about removing friction. Every product he touched had one goal. Make it so simple you forget there's technology inside. From the iPod's click wheel to Nest's dial, he asked one question over and over. What would my mom do with this? That's the genius of Fadell. He built for people, not for praise. Tony didn't learn by winning. He learned by failing fast and often. Early startups that didn't scale. Products that never shipped. Deadlines missed, patents ignored. But instead of breaking him, it built something tougher. Resilience, clarity, conviction. He once said, make mistakes, just don't hide them. That's the mark of a real innovator. Not perfection, just persistence. Tony and Steve Jobs didn't always agree. But they understood each other. Jobs pushed for magic. Fadell pushed for function. Together they built miracles. Their dynamic was fiery, filled with debates, sharp words, long silences. But it worked because both wanted the same thing. To change the way people live. In the end, it wasn't about winning. It was about building what others thought impossible. Innovation comes at a cost. Tony once slept under his desk for weeks. He sacrificed weekends, friendships, even his health. Because building great things takes everything. Some called it obsession. Others called it burnout. But Tony never regretted it. He believed if you weren't all in, you were already out. It's not a blueprint for everyone, but it's the one that built the future. These days, Tony lives in Paris. Far from Silicon Valley, far from the spotlight. He writes, he invests, he guides. He's building futures quietly, the same way he always did. You might not see him on billboards, but when the next big product drops, check the blueprints. Because chances are, Tony Fadell's fingerprints will be there, helping build what's next. Fame was never the plan. Tony once said, when you're busy building, you don't have time to pose. While others chased headlines, he chased deadlines. He knew attention fades, but impact echoes. And maybe that's why his work still holds up. The iPhone, the iPod, Nest. They weren't built to impress. They were built to matter. And that's how you outlive trends. Tony Fadell swears by one design rule. Solve 3 problems at once or don't bother. That's how the iPhone was born. A phone, an internet communicator, and an iPod in one. It's how Nest worked: energy-saving, modern UI, and remote control. If it didn't fix multiple problems, it wasn't worth building. That's not design advice. That's a life filter. Look closely at modern tech, and you'll spot Tony's DNA everywhere. Swipe interfaces, minimalist hardware. Human-centered design before it was trendy. From Google to Tesla, from smart homes to wearables. His quiet revolution shaped them all. And every time a founder says, "We built it to feel right," you're hearing Tony Fadell's philosophy echo forward. If credit were currency, Tony would be quietly rich. But that's not how he measures value. He measures it in impact, in influence, in the future built. Because legacy isn't about who claps for you on stage. It's about who builds after you leave. And by that standard, Tony Fadell is one of the richest minds in tech. So why tell Tony Fadell's story now? Because the future will be built by people who never make headlines. By thinkers, tinkerers, quiet rebels. Tony reminds us the real creators aren't always center stage. But they shape what we hold, what we wear, what we trust. And if we don't name them, we risk forgetting how progress really happens. Imagine if tech history had rolling credits. Tony Fadell's name would be near the top. But he never asked for a spotlight. He just wanted to make things work better. This video isn't about rewriting history. It's about expanding it. Because when we know who really builds our world, we change who we choose to celebrate next. Tony wasn't just an engineer. He was a connector between software and hardware, between vision and reality, between what we needed and what we didn't know we wanted. Every swipe, every click, every smooth transition. You can trace that back to a mind that cared. Not just about what the product did, but how it felt doing it. You won't find Tony Fadell's logo on your phone, but his signature is everywhere. The way your thumb fits the UI. The way your device charges just fast enough. The way simplicity makes you feel smart. That's the invisible mark of a builder who thinks in details. He doesn't sign the glass. He shapes the experience under it. If Tony Fadell built the iPhone today, would it even be a phone? Maybe it would sense your mood. Maybe it would disappear into your clothes. Maybe it wouldn't be a device at all. Because Tony never just built products. He built bridges to the future. And that future still has his fingerprints all over it. Tony Fadell's legacy isn't loud. It hums quietly through the tech we use every day. He didn't build fame. He built foundations. In a world full of noise, his silence was a statement. His work a whisper that changed everything. So next time you hold your phone, ask yourself, who really put that future in your hand? Every masterpiece hangs in a frame. But we rarely ask who built the frame. Tony Fadell was that frame for Apple's biggest masterpiece. He didn't just hold the product together. He gave it structure, vision, soul. And while history framed Steve Jobs in gold, it left Tony in the margin. Maybe now, it's time we hang both names on the same wall. This wasn't a tech story. It was a recognition story. Tony Fadell didn't ask for this spotlight. But history needs balance. And the next generation needs role models who build, not brand. If this story changed how you see the iPhone, Imagine what else you haven't heard. Subscribe, because next time, we're telling the story of another forgotten name behind something you use every day.